Welcome to the SubBrit summer trip. On the 28th of August 2024, we sailed up the Thames Estuary visiting forts from the Second World War. We sailed from Queensborough on the Isle of Sheppey all the way out to Knockjohn Fort, a former Royal Navy fort, and sailing back by Shivering Sands Fort and Red Sands Fort. As a bonus on the way out, we also sailed around the SS Richard Montgomery, of course observing the exclusion zone. The first stop on our trip out to the Thames Estuary was the SS Richard Montgomery, which is a wrecked American Liberty cargo ship. The Liberty ships are a class of ships that were relatively cheap to build, very quick to build, that the US made for their merchant marine in their literal thousands. The Richard Montgomery was named after an Irish officer who fought in the American Revolutionary War. The ship was anchored one night on the Thames Estuary on the North Sandbank, and as low tide came, the ship settled on the sandbank, and with part of the ship on a sandbank, part off the sandbank, it broke the ship's back at low water. There were several thousand tons of ammunition on the ship, of which it's believed there are still about 3,000 tons or 3 kilotons of ammunition on the ship. We then continued our journey out to the Maunsell sea forts. The Maunsell sea forts taking their name after their designer, Guy Maunsell, who was a commissioned officer in the Royal Engineers in World War I on the Western Front. There were two types of Maunsell sea forts, those that were designed for and built by the Navy and those that were designed for and built by the Army. Both types of sea forts served the same purpose. They were there to prevent the Thames being used as a navigable aid to the enemy so that they couldn't fly down the Thames towards London and the vital docks that London had. All the forts were armed, however the armaments and operations were quite distinctly different between the Army and the Navy. The Navy platforms were armed with two QF or quick firing 3.7-inch guns for anti-aircraft purposes, as well as a pair of 40mm Bofors guns on the slightly raised platforms. The Navy towers also had radar. I was lucky enough to then spend a spell in the pilot house as we headed off for Red Sands Fort and Shivering Sands Fort, the Army forts. The Army towers were slightly different to the Navy. There were 7 individual towers, all linked well above sea level at tower height by gangways. 4 of the towers mounted a single 3.7-inch QF or quick firing armament. There was 1 control tower, there was 1 searchlight tower, and there was 1 40mm Bofors tower. What's less well known is that the Maunsell Army forts weren't just limited to the Thames Estuary. There were indeed 3 towers placed in the Liverpool Bay. However, I don't believe that the Liverpool Bay shot down any enemy. However, the Maunsell sea forts had the distinction of having shot down enemy planes in action. The forts shot down 22 aircraft and 30 flying bombs. Thank you for watching and listening today. If you've enjoyed what you've watched and you've heard, please like and subscribe. It's totally free and it really helps us out. Thanks again.